I hope you enjoy this short clip taken from a more in-depth discussion with independent researcher and my friend Spencer Kraus, as we talk about his recent work on the temple, sacred handclasps as tokens and symbols of the resurrection of the dead. And if you like the video, make sure you give it a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button to make sure you stay tuned for the full-length interview with Spencer as it drops in a few days. And if you'd like to support the channel further, consider becoming a channel member, where you'll have access to videos and interviews not available to the public, and where you'll be able to see new videos before they're made public. Thanks for watching Covenant Origins.
This starts with April 16th, 1843. The prophet Joseph Smith addressed the assembly of the saints at the temple of the Lord upon the subject of the death, burial, and resurrection of the saints. At this time, Joseph had been asked to give a lot of sermons for funerals, and he had just learned that one of the elders who had been serving in England had died. And so that he kind of did a one sermon for all these funerals, just so many birds with one stone. But it's in this sermon that uh, he he declares, God hath shown unto me a vision of the resurrection of the dead. I saw the graves open, and the saints, as they arose, took each other by the hand, even before they got up or while getting up. Great joy and glory rested upon them. And he would go on to say, so plain was the vision, I actually saw men before they had ascended from the tomb, as though they were getting up slowly. They took each other by the hand, and it was my father and my son, my mother and my daughter, my brother and my sister. And when the voice calls, suppose I am laid by the side of my father, what would be the first joy of my heart? Where is my father, my mother, my sister? They are by my side. I embrace them, and they me. So for Joseph Smith, uh, uh, in this grand vision he saw, the resurrection of the dead is very closely connected to a sacred handclasp. And he would even go on to say on another occasion, the place where a man is buried has been sacred to me in direct connection with the saints' ability to take each other by the hand and perhaps even take Jesus Christ by the hand as they're resurrected. And again, on June 11th, 1843, Joseph would again speak on this and say that in the resurrection, some are raised to be angels, others are raised to become gods. These things are revealed in the most holy place in a temple prepared for that purpose. So whatever happens in the resurrection, Joseph is clearly connecting this to the ordinances of the Holy Temple. And hmm, uh, all of this connects with, what he had taught as early as 1839. In 1839, on June 27th, Joseph Smith met with many of the apostles, and Wilford Woodruff wrote about this in his journal, and he said that Joseph taught that a hand clasp was one of the vast number of keys of the kingdom of God, which could be used in order to detect the devil when he transforms himself nigh unto an angel of light. And Joseph would repeat these instructions repeatedly, the most famous of which, as you mentioned, is canonized in section 129 of the Doctrine and Covenants, that there are three grand keys, by which we can detect if an angel is a true messenger or Satan trying to deceive those he appears to. And
Yeah. And just kind of real quick, because this is so fresh and we just read through section 129 of the Doctrine and Covenants as recently as last week for our Come
Mhm.
Follow Me program, this is going to be fresh in a lot of people's minds. And I wonder how many Latter-day Saints will have connected this section with a temple context. Because as it reads, there's nothing overtly explicit about the temple, Um, and so this is kind of one of those topics that if you don't really know what you're looking at, you just might miss it.
Mhm.
And as you already mentioned, one of the big, and this is a very short section. It's only 9 verses. But you already mentioned towards the end of the section here, we have these keys, these grand keys to know the administration of angels, whether they're from God or from a Satan or a deceptive um, spirit. And so we have these kind of the keys that we're going to talk about here. But if you wouldn't mind indulging me for a moment, I do kind of want to read section 129
Yeah,
um,
absolutely.
briefly to give some context for the listeners at home who don't have it immediately available to pull up in front of them. So this is section 129 of the Doctrine and Covenants. It's only 9 verses long. It's recorded as being instruction from Joseph Smith at Nauvoo, February 9th, 1843. And as far as I understand it, this actual section, the content of the section, is actually taken from the journal of William Clayton.
Yes.
Um, and there are several other sections from the Doctrine and Covenants that were canonized as part of the Doctrine and Covenants that were also similarly taken from journal entries of William Clayton and others who served as scribes and so forth for Joseph at the time. Um, so I want to read through these 9 verses quickly. I won't try to stay on it too long, but just for context here, what we're talking about and why the quotes that you have been quoting and that we're talking about are going to provide some further context for this.
Yeah.
So, starting verse 1, it says, there are two kinds of beings in heaven, namely angels, who are resurrected personages having bodies of flesh and bone. For instance, Jesus said, handle me and see, for a spirit hath not flesh and bones as ye see me have. Secondly, the spirits of just men made perfect, they who are not resurrected, but inherit the same glory. And I think we would infer that at some point they will be resurrected.
Hmm.
Um, Verse 4 says, when a messenger comes saying he has a message from God, offer him your hand and request him to shake hands with you. If he will be an angel, he will do so, and you will feel his hand. If he be the spirit of a just man made perfect, he will come in his glory, for that is the only way he can appear. Ask him to shake hands with you, but he will not move, because it is contrary to the order of heaven for a just man to deceive. But he will still deliver his message. If it be the devil as an angel of light, when you ask him to shake hands, he will offer you his hand, and you will not feel anything. You may therefore detect him. These are 3 grand keys whereby you may know whether any administration is from God. So that's it. That is section 129. So on its surface, without any further context, it may be easy to not see this as having anything explicitly to do with the temple.
Hmm.
But as we're going to talk about today, that couldn't be further from the truth. I appreciate you, Spencer, for kind of indulging me there for a moment. But getting back to 18 was it 1839, wherein we
Yeah.
have Joseph as early as I believe June, right? You said
Yeah, June 27th, 1839. Uh, and I'm glad that you brought that up and we read through that because when you read through section 129, it would be easy to just kind of gloss over everything and not see the context that this is offered in. But, as I mentioned, Joseph gives these instructions multiple times. One of my favorite, precisely because it offers this context, is on May 1st, 1842. This is 3 days before the first endowments are given on May 4th, 1842, in the upper room of the red brick store,
Star Wars Day.
keeping that in mind. So Joseph taught that the keys that are discussed in section 129 and that he had discussed earlier with the apostles in 1839 as they are certain signs and words by which false spirits and personages may be detected from true, which cannot be revealed to the elders till the temple is completed. The devil knows many signs, but does not know the sign of the Son of Man or Jesus. And no one can truly say he knows God until he has handled something. And this can only be in the holiest of holies. So Joseph Smith is clearly connecting all of this to what will happen in the temple. And so, as you read section 129, Stephen Harper in his commentary on the Doctrine and Covenants, he wrote that this is euphemistic. It's no more about shaking hands than the phrase kicking the bucket is about someone kicking a bucket. So there's something much deeper going on here. And that, there are bounds placed on the devil. We can tell that. And because, if I were the devil and I had known this, I just wouldn't offer to shake anyone's hands. But it's clear that he's bound to do so in some capacity, and that God's power, compels him to do so as a sign to us that whatever happens in this handshake, we can know that we're dealing with a true messenger or Satan. And so we get all of this, and it's connected very closely to uh, the temple. And so Joseph Smith is using this hand clasp in two different capacities here. Um, and I think especially with its connection to the temple, they're one in the same uh, ritual that's probably being referred to here. Uh, and especially when it comes to the resurrection of the dead, we find ample evidence that early Jews and Christians believed that in the resurrection there would be some sort of sacred embrace between parties in this act of resurrecting one another. And we find this in the Bible and in other early Jewish and Christian texts, if we wanted to dive into that next.
Yeah, I also wanted to point out too, because so May 1st, he gave that statement
Hmm.
to kind of, I think, maybe prepare the 12 and those in attendance for the eventual instructions in the presentation of the endowment in the red brick store just a few
Yeah.
days later. Um, and both historians and critics alike will be apt to point out that only 2 months prior to this, in March of 1842, Joseph joined the Freemasons. And so a lot of critics are very quick to point out, there wasn't a quick turnaround between Joseph joining the Masons at the time and the sort of development of the presentation of the endowment that he prepared for the brethren in the red brick store in May. And while a lot has been said by both Latter-day Saint historians and faithful members, as well as critics alike, with regards to the connection between Freemasonry and the presentation of the endowment, and specifically the signs and tokens, um, it is very interesting to point out that you included in your works here, but I want to double back and make mention of it, that Joseph actually is talking about sacred handclasps 3 years earlier in 1839. That's
Yeah.
3 years prior to joining the Masons. So he already had in mind some sort of ritual embrace or ritual handclasp of some kind or another in mind. And I think maybe um, it just may well have been that joining the Masons at the time gave him a little bit of clarity into what those tokens, those sacred handclasps, may look like in form, in order to present them to the church for its specific sacred function in the temple. So maybe kind of at the time back in 1839, and again, it may be that he spoke on this earlier than that. We just don't have anything recorded specifically,
Hmm.
at least as far as we're aware. It's possible he was talking about some sort of sacred embrace or hand clasp as part of the connection to the temple prior to June of 1839. Regardless, it seems obvious to me that he had a very 30,000 foot view throughout his ministry in the Kirtland period, um, that eventually developed enough for him to kind of hone in and zoom in on certain aspects in the Nauvoo period that I don't think he was maybe necessarily prepared, or maybe the church wasn't prepared for at the time prior to that. So I don't know what your thoughts are on that, but that's just kind of from a gloss over those years of going from transitioning from Missouri and Kirtland to Nauvoo. That seems to me to be a very reasonable kind of explanation for what's going on, at least in Joseph's mind.
Oh yeah, and I think especially we can already see as early as 1839 that this is something on Joseph's mind, that connecting with the divine in this sacred embrace or hand clasp was something that was expected for the saints to do. And I think it's entirely reasonable that when Joseph became a Mason, that did still serve as a catalyst for the way that it could be presented for how the saints could do this. But he didn't get this idea from Freemasonry. A great work on the topic of Joseph Smith and Freemasonry is Jeff Bradshaw's book, published by the Interpreter Foundation. Um, I'm blanking on the name. It's like Freemasonry and let me. But anyways, if you go to the Interpreter Foundation's website, you'll easily find it. One thing that he does point out is pretty much everything that people will point to as um, a connection between Joseph Smith and Masonry we see earlier in the Bible. Even this idea of taking God by the hand is something that shows up in the Psalms, oftentimes a bit hidden in the King James English translation, and it's something that I know some scholars, such as Don Perry, have even pointed to as being present in Isaiah, as Isaiah 55, verse 6,
Right.
could probably be translated as, within my house and within my walls, I will give them a hand and a name. Um,
Yeah.
and that's how Don Perry translates it, and others. This is the idea of, taking God by the hand in a temple, especially in a coronation type setting, is something that, people have pointed out for years in the Bible. And
Yeah.
so it's something that I think certainly plays into this, is that you know um, Freemasonry is as great as it was. It just kind of served as a catalyst for people and a way to prepare them for the temple endowment, which was something much better and greater that Joseph already had in his mind all of the pieces for this well before 1842.
Yeah. And they serve different functions.
Oh yeah.
Um,
Um,
so while in form they are the same or similar, um, and I've I've talked to other Latter Day Saints who are Freemasons. In fact, a friend of mine, Hayden Carroll, who you might be aware of,
mhm.
is a Freemason. He's come on the channel. We've spent hours talking about his experience in Freemasonry as well. The while the forms are quite similar, the functions are quite different, and Joseph is using these forms specifically for a sacred temple context to teach the principles and keys related to the restored gospel of Christ and the atonement. That's wildly different than what is
Mhm.
going on in Freemasonry at the time that he was a member. I do have the name of that book by Jeffrey Bradshaw,
Yes.
by printed by the Interpreter Foundation. This is called Freemasonry and the Origins of Temple. Excuse me, the Freemasonry and the Origins of Latter Day Saint Temple Ordinances. And that is available on the Interpreter Foundation's website for anybody who is interested. I have a copy, the PDF, as well, and I can attest to the great work that Bradshaw has done with that.
Yeah. No, and just, like you said, as someone who's interested in becoming a Mason myself, I've, from what I've found, the function and the entire purpose of Freemasonry is different than what happens in a temple. And so that I can say, I also have friends who are Latter-day Saints and Masons, and the differences really do outweigh the similarities, whatever there may be. And so I think we can recognize, like, yeah, Freemasonry played an important part in the coming forth of the endowment, but we shouldn't ever overstate it to say like it was plagiarized from Freemasonry or anything. And uh, it very clearly is something that Joseph had in his mind well before uh, 1842.